Hello everyone and welcome back. This is episode 5 of the M3 Lee project. In the past episodes we've spent some time really weathering out this model, especially using weathering pencils and artist oils. Well, in this episode, let's give this model some room to roam. A little bit of a jungle scene, as if maybe this Lee were just on its way into Mandalay for that decisive encounter in March of 1945. We've got some work to do, quite a bit of work actually, so let's get started. Well, if you've followed a few of my videos by now, where I've made some small bases, you'll know that I like to start with a little bit of a board. I just like the foundation and weight. And this is just a 6 by 9 inch piece of MDF. But it gives me something as a nice platform and a little bit of stability which to build the base upon. And then next, of course, I like to use foams of various natures and densities. And that's where I'll build up a little bit of the elevation. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and use some of this relatively inexpensive insulation foam that is got at the Home Improvement Center. And we'll just kind of size this to fit on this piece of wood, being applied down with a little bit of white PVA glue. Cutting the foam, well, I still do that the old-fashioned way. No fancy hot wire cutters for me, by golly. Well, I did go out and get a new razor saw with a little sharper blade, so that helped quite a bit. But still quite a bit of brute force and just hacking and cutting here and there. And slowly but surely, I'll get the slope and the definition that I'm looking for. The layout for the scene is really very basic. I'm going to build a road here across the diagonal of the base, and I think I'll have a little bit of a downhill slope to that road just to give a little bit more interest. Then on the back side, I've got a little bit of height, and that will be a small hillside or maybe a rock outcropping. I think that this whole little vignette is really going to come together when we start adding all the decorative elements. And in particular, I'm really looking forward to, I have this idea how to make some bamboo, which I think will really set this off and set the tone. Well, let's get started on making some bamboo. And I get started by using some bamboo grilling sticks. And these are the kind that you use to shish kebab or add meat to for the barbecue. And I just get some of different sizes, different lengths, even including some wooden toothpicks. Well, I'm a little short on real-life references where I live, but my friend Google, well, he was able to help me out with some images of bamboo. And of course, one of the first things I notice is there's these rings, or I guess a growth rings, about every foot and a half up the stalk. And I needed to recreate those. I tried a couple of different ideas first, using thread or string and a few other items, but then I settled in on using the thin wire, which I just went ahead and annealed using the hot flame just to make it easier to work with. And then I just tightly wrap that around the skewers themselves. So I'm going to need a lot of these, so I go ahead and do a few of these all at the same time just so I have enough of these set up for myself. And this is the same process if you're going to make replacement springs for your models. Same idea, just wrapping some thin wire around a little bit of a post to the right diameter, slide it off, cut it to length, and you have a new spring. But of course, I don't need a spring, I need ringlets. And that's easy enough to do. And it's just a matter of taking your blade and slicing down between the various circles here just to separate them, cut them apart from each other. And then I have something I can use to recreate the rings on the bamboo stalks. And then once I had a little bit of a collection of my little ringlets, it was really just as simple as sliding them over the skewer, kind of spacing them out. They don't really need to be that even because there is some differences between them. And then set them in place with a little bit of PVA or white glue. At this point, I was actually pleasantly surprised because even without paint, these actually look the part because of the natural color of the wood. I think I'm on the right track here. I think this is going to work out just fine. And along with the rings, another trait of bamboo is they have this kind of a hollow core to them. And so I wanted to do that, especially for the ones you can look down into from above. So I just, with a drill bit, just kind of drilled out a little bit of the interior side of this just to leave a little bit of an exterior wall for that bit of a hollow appearance. One of the limitations of my bamboo skewers was that they came in only shorter lengths. I think they were like 6 inches. It was the longest one I had. And I wanted a few of my bamboo stalks to be, well, a little bit taller. And in order to do this, I needed to be able to blend 2 skewers together. And of course, gluing end to end on especially a small little surface like this isn't going to work very well. So the best idea is drill down on either side, so 2 skewers, put a hole down the center, add a little bit of wire for strengthening between the 2 sides, and then just glue them together. And then I have a longer stick that I can cut to any length for whatever size bamboo stalk that I'm looking to build. I've got a little bamboo grove here that I think is going to look really good on my base. I really can't wait to get this painted up and see how everything starts to come together. Well, next up I need to make some branches and leaves for this bamboo, and for that I'm just using regular printer paper and I'm just cutting out what is basically small triangles, and these will become the leaves. The branches will be made from the same brass wire that I used to make the grow rings, and I'm just going to drop it into a little bit of this burnishing fluid just to make sure they're a dark color so I don't have any shiny spots on the final piece. So I'll start with a small drill bit and just put a few holes here and there along the stalk, and then I'll use a bit of that wire and insert them into the holes, and I'll use a little bit of CA to affix them into place. And so now all those little paper leaves that I made earlier, well, they can be set into place one at a time. A small drop of white glue onto the base, place it where you need it, hold it there, hopefully it stays until the glue set. It's prone to falling off. The leaves are prone to falling off. Well, adding those leaves took a little longer than I thought they might. That was about 2 hours worth of work, but now it's time to plant some trees because I'm really itching to see how this is all going to look. So I'm just going to move them, stick them into the ground here, kind of get a rough idea, and see where I need to go from here. This is always one of those fun times when you kind of see things as it starts to come together. And so now that I got the model sitting on the base, you can see the slope of the road gives a little bit of drama and action to the scene. That nice rock outcropping or the little hill behind here, we'll work on that in a little while and get that looking sharp. I really feel like from this point forward, everything's going to start coming together pretty quickly here. And so I just want to add some very light green hints to this, just kind of a light overspray using this golden olive. And that's just going to give that really nice, lush jungle appearance to these. Well, now on to the groundwork itself. And if you've watched any of my other videos, my prior videos, you'll have seen where I'm a really big fan of using plaster of Paris, or paper mache as it might be called. And this is just because it's, well, inexpensive, it's easy to work with, and it's super, super durable. The process is easy. I've got dry plaster that I mixed with water, and that's in the little blue bowl behind. I've got strips of paper that I just tear off, dip into the plaster, and squish them down into place where I want them to be. So once I have the plaster more or less started and in place, what I'm really starting to look for here, and this is what I think is probably the most fun part of building up groundwork, is to start adding those textures. And I'm one of those guys who, when I go for walks and such, I'm always looking down at my feet, trying to find things that I think I'd be able to use in one of my scenes. And so, for instance, these are just wood chips, and this came from a tree that fell over during a snowstorm and that they cut up and chipped up. And I just grabbed a handful of these chips, knowing that at some point maybe I'll be able to use them sometime. And, well, this is that time. So my idea here for this little edge of this little hillside is that I want this to look sort of like a little bit of a, say, rock outcropping here at the base. And yes, I know I could use some magic sculpt and sculpt in some rock texture or carve it into the plaster, but you know, if you have something natural, you're already halfway there. It's like cheating. Once I have selected my chips and I've got them in place, then it's just a matter of integrating everything to unify the appearance. So again, I'm just using a little bit of that plaster and just kind of tapping it around the edges and stuff so that these chips become within the scene instead of just placed on top of the scene. Once I have that little hillside all set up, I want to make sure I also have texture throughout the entire scene, especially like on that roadway. I just want to make sure there's a little bit of something visual there, like a little bit of gravel or dirt. Okay, you've waited for it, now you've got it. From the earlier videos, this is my blue bowl of good stuff, and this is where I keep all those different sorts of goodies that I go for in my walks and collect, and then I pull out when I'm ready to start working on some sort of a diorama or groundwork base. So now it's time for even another layer of texture onto the base. So I'll start with a little coating of white PVA glue here, and I'll dilute it with a little bit of water to get kind of a wash out of it. Once the glue's spread about, I just take a deep dive to the bottom of the bowl and pick out some of the finer dirt and sticks and pebbles and rocks and twigs. And all of this is just about adding interest to that groundwork. Of course, we're not going to forget about the little hill on the backside here. So I've already spread out a little bit of the white glue. And now I once again dive into the blue bowl of goodies and just add a few elements here and there just to give it some more visual interest. Well, next up is going to be painting the base here. And for that, I'm going to be using acrylic colors. Now the challenge here is that I've already painted and basically weathered to completion the model separately, and I've done that with using the oils and the pencils. Well, I can't quite see myself drawing all these colors on here with the pencil, so I have to find colors that I feel like will work with the model so it all becomes one unified piece at the end here. So the first color is just laying down a very dark brown color, just kind of a basic earth tone. Now I need to start working towards the colors that are used with the pencils and the oils on the model. This yellow right now looks way too yellow and probably is, but I'm going to be able to tone that down here because it's all about adding layers. I'm going to add a color beige, which is very much closer to the dust effects colors created both by the pencils and by the oils onto the model. Now it's important to kind of notice here that I'm not trying to cover up the work I've done earlier with the paints. I want some of those different colors to show through, the darks and the yellows and such like that, because that's where my shadows and the visual interest are going to come from. Well, speaking of adding color tones, here we go. Being quite bold here. When I think of jungles and tropical terrain, I want to establish that feeling here by just literally just painting on the groundwork. Now this green color could represent some grass, it could represent some moss, algae, whatever, but I think it's going to work well once I get the vegetation grown up around it, just to establish that lushness at the base layer of the groundwork. If we think about our diorama bases or our groundwork as we do our models, it's not uncommon on our models to do some weathering and then need to come back and reestablish some different aspects, some panel lines or something like that. And that's the same thing with doing groundwork. Always look for places where you can come back in and reestablish a little bit of color or add some highlights or just do something that will catch the eye. Well, just as I like to use oil paints in the weathering of my models, I enjoy using the oil paints on the weathering of the groundwork, and that's what's going on right now. And I'm using the exact same colors that I use with the model onto the surface, and this will help to unify and really bring everything together for a real cohesive appearance on the final presentation. Well, I think about the last thing I want to do for this episode is just plant my bamboo, and that's just a matter of taking them out and poking them into the groundwork here and making it look like a little bamboo patch on the side of the road. And then the very last thing I'll do as a final weathering step onto the bamboo itself is just give them a little bit of a light wash using the oil paints. And that's just to bring out some of that texture. So I've got that nice texture of the sticks themselves, got a little bit of wood grain going on there. And then I've also got those little grow line wires going around. I just want to make sure that those are nice and visible. Well, as I continue working on this bamboo, I want to say thank you. If you've made it this far on this video, you're quite the trooper. This has been a long one. If you like this video, please hit that like and subscribe and hit that bell just to be notified when new videos are released, which I try to do every Tuesday. If you really like this channel and would like to support it further, I do have a Patreon page, and the link for that is in the description below. My Patreons generally get a look at the videos before they are released to the general public. I try to offer high-resolution photographs of the work in progress. We discuss upcoming projects, and the chat room is always open for discussion and questions. I think we'll get one more episode out of the Lee. At the next episode, I do have a figure that I've painted, so we'll do a little bit of figure painting, and then we'll finish up and we'll integrate the model onto the base and maybe do a little bit of pigment work with that. I'm not sure how we're going to pull that together. But until the next episode, again, thank you very much for being a part of this episode, and thank you for your support. We'll talk to you soon. Happy modeling.